Hello, everyone, and welcome into crushthestreet.com. Lots to talk about today, and I really want to dive into what happened on the CME and the news as it relates to Bitcoin and it being a derivative. And I reached out to Andy Hoffman to discuss this. He's now with CryptoGoldCentral.com, an incredible website. You guys need to go and check it out. But I wanted to talk to him about this because he's covered the manipulation in precious metals for years, and a lot of people, myself included, were concerned at this news because does the manipulation in Bitcoin start here? And when I reached out to him, he said, sure, let's jump on a call, let's discuss it. And since then, we have Bcash news, and we even have some news on gold that I want to touch on today with Andy. Andy, without any further ado, thanks for coming on Crush the Street.
Thanks for having me. And by the way, we'll throw in also the potential news that the Chinese may be eliminating electricity subsidies for Bitcoin mining, or pretty much all mining. That just came out this morning.
You know, I didn't see that news, but I know a lot of people have been talking about that, where Bitcoin and the mining will kind of shift to where the electricity is essentially free. And of course, it's never free. But I'm curious to get your thoughts on that. Do you want to start there? Yeah,
absolutely. In fact, when I first saw it this morning, and I find, everything's on Twitter, and people, you should follow me at Andy_Hoffman_CG. I'm very active there. It's a lot of fun. This is where pretty much the Bitcoin community is. And the first thing I saw was this article that came out in China that at least in one province, everything with these Chinese articles is difficult to interpret, especially because they're in Chinese, and you go to Google Translate and it still gives you very difficult translations. What appears to be going on is, at least in this one area, if not everywhere, they're going to be eliminating these subsidies that make electricity so cheap in China, which is why it's so concentrated, the mining in China. And all over the Twitter sphere, it's like, oh no, that's going to cause Bitcoin to crash. And so, my first thought is, it's gotten to the point where China's become like the Fed is to gold. Like, it doesn't matter what they say. If the Fed came out and said, we're buying gold, gold would still go down. I mean, it's gotten to the point where that's the knee-jerk reaction that people have. Anytime China speaks, it's bad for Bitcoin. Now, of course, everything they've done has been good for Bitcoin. Banning their exchanges is a great thing for Bitcoin. If they ban mining, it would be even better for Bitcoin. That's why I wrote this morning. I said banning Bitcoin, China banning Bitcoin. No, Bitcoin is going to be banning China. And this would be the greatest thing ever, because, you look at all the issues that we've had in Bitcoin for these years. It's completely decentralized. That's what makes it different from all other money and all other cryptocurrencies, except this electricity issue has enabled all these miners to be concentrated in China. They probably have well over half of the hash power, including the biggest player. I'm not sure what percent Bitmain has. It's got to be like a quarter or so. And it's no surprise that all of the attacks on Bitcoin have been centered around this one company, Bitmain, who's run by this evil troll named Jihan Wu, who's kind of partners with Roger Ver in Segwit2x and Bcash and Bitcoin Unlimited, and anything that they think they can throw around their money and their hash power to try to take over Bitcoin. It's caused all of these issues, which ultimately get resolved. And we've got Segwit, price of Bitcoin around $7,000. The network is stronger than ever. But the problem is you have had this pocket of decentralization that needs to be fixed. And the B Gold fork that just came out this week, it's trading at about 3 or 4% of Bitcoin, is one such attempt to change the algorithm so that the big miners can't dominate. And but that's just one step in that direction. But the bigger step would be if China actually took a draconian action like this. And as usual, it'd be a government, like when they thought they banned the exchanges, they thought that would like kill Bitcoin and made it stronger. This would make Bitcoin a lot stronger. And in one fell swoop, it would really, really harm Bitmain and Jihan Wu. So as you see, the price hasn't done anything. In fact, the price is still reacting more or less with a full 100% negative correlation to Bcash. As we're in the final phase of this, this attack, which pretty much failed and is almost over. And I just think that if this is the case, if China really is going to do this, It will be amazing. You just saw these huge announcements in the last few months that in Japan and Russia they're going to be gigantic investment in mining farms. Also, you saw Fidelity Investments is now mining it actively, and that's just presaging all the massive institutional investment of Bitcoin you're going to see in the coming years. So, very good news in my opinion.
Andy, so I was going to talk to you about the CME, get into that, but since we are on this topic of China, Jihan Wu, Roger Ver, let's discuss Bcash. I'm looking at it now. It's at 1348. Maybe I might need to refresh my screen. But it did spike to 2,700, and Bitcoin at the time was crashing. I mean, I know you'll probably correct me for that, but it was pulling back. But at that moment, there was some sort of a gut check, because it was easy to disregard Bcash when it was $300, but when it was spiking the way it did, despite someone like yourself who understands the fundamentals behind it, the market's going to see that and go, hey, this is coming up in price, and price legitimizes things in many ways. So let's get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, that is a good statement. Price legitimizes. It certainly has impacted the gold market all these years, to the point where people are not paying attention to it anymore. And at the same time, the PPT has in some way legitimized an economy that is dead in the water. I mean, when you think about how comical it is, how bad the economy is, how the debt is exploding, the inflation. I mean, today you had the highest inflation reading in 6 years. Rates have still not gone up for all the hype. The Fed has still not done anything. The ECB, the Bank of Japan, they still are at rock bottom negative interest rates, etc. And and you go back again to how the market started surging when Trump got in. I mean, remember, first of all, it was plunging before he got in because they said if he gets in, it's bad. And then as soon as he got in, they changed their mind because you got to manipulate it up either way. And they said, oh, he's in. We're going to have tax cuts, infrastructure development. We're gonna repeal Obamacare, all these things. And on minute one, like the next day, I did a podcast and I said, Turning on Trump, it was called. I said, absolutely none of these things are going to get done, and none have gotten done, and yet the market goes up pretty much every day because they've taken over the market, and that's exactly what we're talking about. That price has made this perception that the economy is good when actually nothing good has happened, and the same with gold. Now, with Bcash, what you're seeing is. This is the fourth time this year in 8 months that we've seen these same two guys. I mean, when you go to Bitcoin Unlimited, which was trying to do the exact same thing as Bcash ultimately did back in March, but it failed to do it. It was Roger Ver and Jihan Wu. Then you had the new universally activated soft fork came from the Bitcoin community to try to get segued in despite Bitcoin Unlimited. So Jihan Wu and Roger Ver come out with the universal user activated hard fork, which is a misnomer in itself, to try to win back the war again, and it pushed Bitcoin down again. And then you had the SegWit 2x thing that came and has caused all this havoc until it finally died last week. And then, of course, there's Bcash, which has been an unending source of attack on Bitcoin, and it's like all the others, Roger Ver and Jihan Wu. And that's why it's so exciting to me to know that they're deluding themselves. I mean, not deluding, but diluting themselves with all these attacks that ultimately fail against Bitcoin. Because when it comes down to it, you're talking about fundamentals. Bcash is kind of a freak. It doesn't really do anything except enrich the miners that are involved in it. They even hard forked yesterday to get rid of the emergency difficulty adjustment, which makes it so attractive to mine. So I think you really just have a power play game going on, and they chose the perfect time to attack, this time right after the 2x was canceled on Wednesday, which you had Bitcoin in a parabolic move, so it was vulnerable to a technical correction. So they come in and they start buying it up and spreading FUD and spamming the mempool, and so you had this big spike, and now the spike has lost half of its gains, and the Bitcoin price has recovered most of its gains, and it's just consolidating. waiting for the Bcash to dilute itself out, and then we'll move to the next phase.
So is it possible, though, that it doesn't? And I'm just trying to be, I guess, not in one direction or another. I mean, we have Amazon trading at $1,000, 300 PE with zero profitability, and the U.S. stock market continuing to go up, and gold not moving significantly. The market doesn't always trade rationally. That's all I'm trying to say. Right.
Well, the thing is with Bcash, it actually can trade irrationally. And maybe it's not even irrational, because the fact is, and my overarching view, the reason that I've switched over to the cryptocurrency side, specifically Bitcoin, is I think that this is the biggest monetary revolution in history, and that literally trillions of dollars worth of legacy asset capital is going to leave for the crypto sector. As I call it, the wall of institutional money, and it's hitting now. You can see it. I mean, the parabolic move in the cryptocurrencies, specifically Bitcoin, but others have moved too. Bcash is another one, Ethereum, and several others. So there's going to be plenty enough room for many cryptocurrencies to have huge moves, and Bcash is, of course, supported more than any other. There is no, I mean, you put all the other ones together, all the people behind Ethereum and Ripple and Litecoin combined don't represent the effort that's going into Bcash. I mean, this is Roger Ver and Jihan Wu, who, even if they are crippled a bit, if the Chinese reduce the profitability of the miners, they are two of the most powerful people and marketable people in the entire sector, and they have a big following. So yeah, the Bcash price can do very well over time. I just think when I say they're going to dilute themselves out, I mean relative to Bitcoin. I don't think it's going to be sustainable that they can maintain a ratio of 0.2 Bitcoin when Bitcoin is getting stronger as an entity and Bcash is really just getting stronger as a marketing machine. And yeah, I mean, I guess it could happen, but I have no fear that that's going to happen, because they're going to have to be really fighting an uphill battle to maintain that valuation relative to Bitcoin once this whole pump ends.
Sure. Well, Andy, I guess the last thing that I would say, and just to prompt you, is that the biggest argument for Bcash is that it's an 8 megabyte block and that transactions are cheaper and that it can be used in microtransactions. This is what Roger Ver promotes. And is there any truth to that, and does it have legs?
I don't think it does at all. Look, I mean, the jury is out on how ultimately the Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash scale, because we're still in early days. I mean, the vast majority of Bitcoin usage is for hodling, or for people who don't know that term, buying and holding, because it's a store of value. And I don't think that there's any need for people to consider it a currency until it becomes a reliable store of value over time, which it's rapidly doing, but it's only been around for 9 years. I mean, it's the same thing with gold. I don't want to spend my Bitcoin. So when Roger Ver is like, no one's spending Bitcoin, it's really slow. Yeah, because I expect it to go up in value. That's why I spend my dollars. That's why when I got my Bcash, rightly or wrongly, I sold it because I have no interest in it. But I think the big block size thing has not been proven by any means. In fact, if you ask the smart people in our sector, they'll say it poses a security risk. It's much harder to protect the network with bigger block sizes. And even if you listen to what Andreas Antonopoulos says, he's kind of like the Satoshi figure, a diplomat in our sector. He's talking about, well, how can you do that? I mean, you're going to need infinite block size increases if you truly want to. If you want to scale on chain, what that means with big blocks, so all the transactions are on the chain. So there's just as many issues there. And the fact is that like all these other altcoins that claim they've fixed the scaling problem, until you actually have people utilizing your currency, it's easy to say, yeah, our transactions are really cheap because no one's using them. In Bitcoin, they actually are using them, and yes, they are using them for commerce, not as much as they need to. I mean, the whole point is people don't want to use it, but there's plenty of transactions going on, and when they're not being, the mempool, meaning the memory pool, is not being spammed by Bcash. Now that we have SegWit, we effectively have a 4 megabyte block size for Bitcoin, And we're barely even using 1 megabyte because there's just no need to. It's very fast unless Bcash is doing its emergency difficulty adjustments or spamming the mempool to slow Bitcoin down. And when it does, so what? No one, most of the people are just buying and holding. So look, of course, anything could happen. I mean, big blocks could work, but the vast majority of the global network, I mean, thousands of nodes, millions of people don't believe that. And that's why the Bitcoin chain is the strongest chain and trades at a much higher price.
Right. Yeah, no, good points there, Andy. Andy, let's talk about the CME news. I know this is something that you've talked about on the World Crypto Network and written about. But you know what? Let's just start off from the beginning. If I'm going to be concerned about Bitcoin being manipulated and treated like gold and silver are in the derivatives market, why are you not concerned, having followed this market now for years?
It's tough. I mean, I have stock answers to why I'm not concerned. But one never knows what will happen until it goes on. The thing is that with gold is almost a 5-decade-long conspiracy, and I hate the word conspiracy, but it's clearly this collusion going on among the central banks. I mean, God, we have the wires found by WikiLeaks. No one, of course, cares with the wires going back and forth between the U.S. and British government in 1974 about how they literally are intending to create the COMEX for the purpose of creating great volatility and discouraging hoarding. And in fact, the COMEX, people don't even realize this because everyone thinks in terms of, well, they abandoned the gold standard in 1971, and there was a big bubble in gold in 1980, but they don't realize gold was not allowed to be owned by the public until January 1975. So between 1933, when it was decreed that you couldn't own it by FDR, until 1975, no one owned it, just the government. So on January 1st, 1975, you could. And guess what day the COMEX went online? December 31st, 1974. I mean, it was clearly started with the distinct purpose of preventing people from owning physical. And the same thing goes with the GLD and all the other paper derivatives that have been created in time. And then you look at what all I've studied. I spent 15 years studying this stuff. There's so many admissions out there of what these bankers have been doing, and convictions and obvious rigging just from, all the stuff that I've watched and observed and analyzed and commentate on for years. There's not a doubt this is a very elaborate game. It's the same game that holds the stock market every day, or keeps interest rates around 1 or 2% around the world, despite all the inflation that's going on. I mean, these are what I call Flintstonian financial technologies compared to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. They are very effective at what they do. They were created in the 80s and 90s to manage markets. But it's and on top of that, in the gold market, you're also talking about the people still think the governments have a lot of gold. They still think the U.S. government has 8,133 tons, or that Germany has whatever their 2,700 tons, or whatever the number is. And there's all the leasing and swapping and derivatives. And you got the Treasury Secretary putting out his tweets that he's going to Fort Knox, and it's all there. I mean, there's just so much that goes into that scheme. And more importantly, the Keynesian propaganda that has gone on all these years has gotten people believing that the government knows best. And now that they've kept the stock market up, pretty much every day for years now, no one even has any interest in gold. So then you go into Bitcoin. Okay, they can have futures. What does that mean? Everyone goes, well, they're just going to naked short the futures and it's going to go to zero, right? And the way I look at it, for one, unlike gold, which has been in I don't know what you want to call it. You can call it a bear market, or you can call it a flat market, or you can call it just a majorly underperforming market. Bitcoin is in a massive bull market, the biggest bull market we've ever seen. And the big money doesn't think of it in terms of anti-dollar. They don't think of it as a political play. They just think of it as a bull market that they want to participate in. And so the general trend is strongly up and getting stronger. And we just passed the $100 billion market cap level, so it brings in all the institutional investment. And of course, having the futures exchange brings in a whole new level of institutional demand for both the underlying asset and for the futures trading, which creates more liquidity, which in turn creates more demand around the world. So you have a lot going for it. And on top of that, it is in fact changing the world. And it is in fact this technology that is immutable and has already proven itself to be immune from government attacks. I mean, we're talking about the Chinese banning exchanges, banning withdrawals from the country. Now they may be banning mining. Jamie Dimon, of all people, comes out attacking Bitcoin because he's so scared of it. And none of these things work because this is really changing the world. So just to come in and say, oh, well, they're going to do it. The other thing is governments have no clue about how Bitcoin works yet. If they did, like the Chinese, they wouldn't be making these draconian things that wind up hurting them. And we know that no governments own material positions. So no one could say, well, the government's got this big position that they can disorder. They got nothing. Governments will be buying right now. They're definitely not going to be able to sell, and it's so scarce. And then, of course, you have the blockchain itself, which is like a giant truth machine. So, you know, the nature of the gold fractional reserve trading is much more difficult to understand because no one really knows how much gold the governments have. And they don't tell you, aside from the derivatives that mess around with the accounting of it, they don't tell you what they're doing. So everyone always has this kind of worry that there's more gold out there, but they just don't know how much. Whereas with the blockchain, every single Bitcoin is accounted for. So, you know, if they're going to, you know, say, oh, we're going to naked short like $10 trillion of Bitcoin futures, it's going to be pretty obvious to the world.
Yeah, I guess that was one of the things that stuck with me is that you basically pointed out that the blockchain will keep these people honest, which I thought was very interesting. I really allowed my mind to go down that rabbit hole for a little while. Andy, you probably saw the Mike Maloney video where he did play both sides of the fence, where Bitcoin could go down or Bitcoin could go to 50,000, and he used the logarithmic chart on basically that's the next stop if we're going to continue on this trajectory. And I thought it was a really interesting video. And I guess because we're still in that early stage, what, $110 billion market cap for Bitcoin alone, and we have all this institutional money coming in, and you know, with the derivatives market, staying in line with the potential for manipulation, is it possible that because we're still so early in the game, Bitcoin still needs to go up 10x before it can even be managed?
Well, first of all, I would say, no disrespect to Mike Maloney personally, I have no interest in listening to what anyone in the gold sector has to say about Bitcoin. I gave everyone the chance. I was probably the only one. I literally can't think of a single other person in the sector who even gave Bitcoin a chance. Yes, I guess Mike Maloney was on the fence about it. Most people just completely disparage it because they don't understand the nature of it. They just want to think it's an enemy to be quashed with propaganda. So I don't really have much view. I didn't see what he wrote, and I disagree strongly that it's a dichotomous thing where Bitcoin can either go to 50,000 or zero. I mean, really, it can only go to 50,000 or zero. There's no chance it can go higher or somewhere in between. It has to either go to zero or become the greatest thing ever.
He might not have said zero exactly,
yeah,
but I mean,
I know, but it's either going to collapse or become something big, and that's not necessarily the truth. Maybe it coexists with a whole bunch of other things in the world and sits somewhere in the middle. So I definitely don't care about logarithmic charts or any of that stuff. I mean, if I did, then the gold and silver prices would be 10 times what they are, but they're not. So, but the fact is, aside from what he's saying, yes, we're still in the nascent stages. There's still, the whole world doesn't understand what's going on, except for a very small amount of people who are focused on the cryptocurrency. I think it's amazing how few people are, given that it's been the best performing asset, like in 7 of the last 8 years. But that will be soon enough, and that's why it's so exciting that the institutional money is going to start coming in. I mean, this is a real vote of confidence that the CME. I mean, look, you had Jamie Dimon calling it a tulip bubble, and 2 months later, the CME, the largest commodities exchange in the world, is going to be trading futures on it. So it's come a long way. It's got its SegWit now. There's no real fears of the immutability of the network anymore. All these hard forks don't have any real impact on it. No one's worried that it's going to, quote, split in two or any of that stuff. But it's still very, very early. Most people have no idea how the technology works. It's still, it's so much easier to use than it was even a year ago. But it's still, for the average person, kind of a brand new scary technology that needs to be made more user-friendly and understandable. The places that you acquire it are very, very behind the times. I mean, God, just a year ago, Coinbase, which is the largest exchange in America, was archaic, and now they're a few notches above that, but they're 100 notches below the New York Stock Exchange. So we have a long, long way to go. And yes, at what point do governments get really scared, right? I mean, the Chinese government got scared when it was a tenth of the price or an eighth of the price. When they had capital controls back in January, the market cap was just a couple of $100 million, and here we are at $100 billion, and they're banning exchanges, and they're going to ban mining. And now the IRS is getting into it. And so, I expect some major, major challenges. I just think in the big picture, because it's a truly decentralized network, unlike Bcash or Ethereum, it's going to be like Don Quixote flailing at windmills trying to stop it. But yes, as it gets bigger and bigger, and more and more people start to use it and shun fiat currency, it's going to draw draconian efforts by the government to stop it. I just don't know what they're going to be able to do, but I certainly know that they're going to try.
And so, I just my final question, that I had asked. I know I asked a long question, but basically, would manipulation be possible at higher prices? And I'm just wondering if maybe they can't manipulate it now because there's just that wall of institutional money coming into it. But say it does go to a couple $1 trillion market cap, and it's now trading a little more stable, and if they wanted to, they go in at that point.
Well, this is a very high-level problem to have. I mean, you're telling me should I be worried that one day a $100 billion market cap will be a few trillion? No, I'm not really worried about that. But it's kind of like
I'm very bullish.
Yes, I know you are. I'm laughing at the nature of the question, because right now this is the best that we can really do as far as think of what would be the worst case scenario, because it really is hard for governments to get much done. But look, I wrote I think it's April of 2012. I wrote this article. You could still Google it. All my Miles Franklin stuff is still up, and it's called "Priceless Precious Metals versus Worthless Dollars." And basically, I called it my answer to all what-if questions, because people go, why would I buy gold? The government will confiscate it, they'll windfall tax it, they'll ban it, they'll nationalize the mines, they'll villainize you, all that stuff. And I say, yeah, but the governments are reactive. They're not going to come in today and ban gold. They do it when it's really threatening them. And by the time it's really threatening them, in gold's case, the way I was thinking back then, I mean, the gold can be $10,000, $20,000 an ounce. And then and the dollar is falling, and people are wanting gold. And I say that's a high-level problem to have. I'll be happy to own contraband gold at $20,000 an ounce if the dollar is failing. And the same thing goes with Bitcoin. If you're talking about a few $1 trillion market cap, and I don't know if you mean Bitcoin alone or the whole crypto industry, but either one will suffice. You're talking about a significant paradigm change in global money has already occurred. The central banks are dramatically less powerful. Sovereign governments are dramatically less powerful because of all the tax revenues they're losing from people trading in anonymous cryptocurrencies. And by the way, at some point, because of SegWit, at some point in the next few years, Bitcoin will be as anonymous as Monero is right now. So it's hard enough to track it as we speak, but a few years from now, it'll be impossible to track. So you're talking about a dramatically changed world where Bitcoin is worth a lot more. Probably a lot of the other cryptocurrencies are worth a lot more. Faith in fiat currency and central banks is dramatically lower. And then we say, well, can governments manipulate? Well, then governments will be a lot weaker than they are now. And again, tell me what they're going to do. I mean, do you realize, like, as great as the case is for, like, if I have gold, it's outside of the system, and yes, it still is great, and you definitely can hold it outside the system. You can hold $1 trillion of Bitcoin in your head. You don't even need to have a Trezor or a piece of paper. You can literally memorize your keys, and so it's unconfiscatable. There's nothing governments could do now. Like, for instance, the Chinese, they banned the exchanges in China. Okay, great. There's still the massive over-the-counter exchanges where the majority of trading goes on anyway. And on top of that, there are these decentralized exchanges that have been in development, which are now accelerating the development. So you're going to have actual exchanges only they're not controlled by anyone. There's no like manager to stop. And by the way, they now have this blockstream.org has now launched satellites into outer space. So when people say, well, the government's going to shut down the internet, well, for one, if you hold your Bitcoin offline, that doesn't matter. But on top of that, now you'll actually be able to transmit Bitcoin in other means other than the internet. And then, of course, the final ridiculous thing about that is if the government shuts down the internet, they basically create anarchy and self-destruction. So I don't think that's something that the government really wants to do.
Sure. Yeah, I think we exhausted that conversation right there. And I guess I want to ask you two more things. We're at the 30-minute mark here, Andy, and I want to ask you about gold real quick, and just your thoughts on this move that Ray Dalio made. The most successful, largest hedge fund in the world, heavily increased their stake in gold right now, and it kind of reminded me of what Soros did, a year or so ago, getting into gold and kind of timing a bull market here. So, and does this excite you at all?
No, it doesn't. But I'll separate it into two different things. The gold bull market has nothing to do with my thoughts of what Ray Dalio is doing. And frankly, I don't think George Soros has ever made big money on gold. I remember he had this whole thing where it was a few years back. He's bought like trillions of dollars worth of gold miners, and then it all collapsed. And then, but when he buys it, they say, oh, look, he's doing it. He's George Soros. But then when he sells it at a huge loss, you don't see anyone writing about it. They just want to write about what he buys. But, no one. And as for these hedge fund managers in general, I don't care what they do. Ray Dalio, does he have a long history with gold? No, he's just, he thinks that there's going to be a market crash. Maybe there will, maybe there won't be. He thinks that will impact gold. The thing is, what I tweeted out right when I saw that article yesterday, I don't know, I have the exact one in front of me, was, doesn't he realize that by buying GLD, he's helping the price go down? Maybe if he figured out that if he bought actual gold, it might go up. But, these guys, they don't do that. They have no real, actually, you could. I mean, Ray Dalio probably is allowed to buy physical gold, but they don't. It's easier to buy GLD and help the cartel to suppress prices with the fractional reserve, naked shorting that's going on. So, no, I don't really care about Ray Dalio or George Soros or what they're doing. But what do I think about gold at these prices? I think, there's a lot of cross currents going on. Actually, I don't write much about it these days. Today I did because I saw some very unique action. When you see the highest PPI in 6 years, which theoretically should get the cartel into, the Fed's going to raise rates and smash gold. But what happened was the dollar crashed, interest rates crashed, and the yield curve hit its flattest level in 10 years. I mean, these are wildly gold bullish and definitely not Federal Reserve raised rates corresponding moves. So I talked about that. The fact is that, again, for all the hype with the stock market being held up, the economy is getting worse. I wrote Inflation Enveloping the World a month ago. It's getting worse and worse, and it's led by the financial markets that have been propped up. Real estate, stocks, bonds. It has caused this massive inflation in the cost of living. At the same time, you've had, I don't even know how long, 15, 20, 30 years of suppression of gold has destroyed the mining industry. Destroyed. I said it 5 years ago, and I'm so tired. I listen to so many people say, no, Andy, you're wrong. As soon as gold goes up, there's been one significant gold discovery in the 15 years I've been watching it, and it still hasn't been developed, and it won't be. It's in Ecuador. There's no production outlook out there. The reserves have been plunging. It's baked in the cake that production's peaked 2 years ago and is going to fall 20%. And how much money over the next decade? How much money printing is going to occur? And how much is confidence in fiat currency going to decline in the next 10 years? So the way I look at it now, for the first time ever, I've been saying I literally see no downside in gold. I've said this all year. Around this level, it's massively capped. The same thing every day. I see every day with the cartel and the cartel heralds, but there's no downside because, and I'm not talking about like 5%. It is so depressed relative to demand and what's going on in the mining industry and the global money printing. It has nowhere to go but up. But because of these bubbles in the financial markets, it's just literally, it doesn't take much to keep it from going up because no one cares at the moment and they're so under control in the paper market. So I think it's just going to be a call option on crisis. When crisis comes, gold is going to surge. It's that simple. Crisis will come. Maybe it comes this year. Maybe they hold it for another 5 years. In the meantime, Bitcoin is going to be slowly eating away at the system, maybe even rapidly eating away at the system and fostering the kind of environment in which a crisis will occur. So I think that and never, more than ever, it's almost like it's like a cash savings account now, gold, because it's not going down, and eventually something's going to make it go up. I've also said about silver that I sold all my silver this summer. I really have no interest in it because in the digital age, I just don't believe that people are going to store thousands of pounds of silver hoping that the gold-silver ratio goes down. I think that the incremental monetary demand is going into Bitcoin. Gold is always going to be the money of kings, and it's going to do just fine. And silver will probably move directionally with gold. I mean, if gold goes up, silver is going to go up. I just don't think the gold-silver ratio is going to fall much. So I would, if I were, what I've done is I only own gold now, and I would say that gold is the better investment, especially when you have Bitcoin out there too.
Yeah, that's a good point. And if anyone can't tell, you're very interested in sound money. It's not. There might be other great investments out there or opportunities, but you're really looking for sound money vehicles that are undervalued and a place where you can sleep at night. And I guess
that's why I call my blog the Sound Money blog of the 21st century.
Well, and you know what? It was actually going to ask you this one last thing, and yes. My whole mindset has kind of been evolving in this whole cryptocurrency space, and I agree with you 100%. Gold and Bitcoin, but I'm starting to see some of these other altcoins not necessarily as a sound money vehicle, but an on-ramp for other technologies and other use cases in the world, or data storage and other applications, other problems that are out there that might need a decentralized solution. And I'm curious just if you would comment on that and just kind of how you see some of these other altcoins. Because for me, I look at coinmarketcap.com initially, I just assumed they were all Bitcoin copycats, and some are. A lot of them are scams. But I feel like there's going to be some that come out and some are emerging as platforms for new technologies that we haven't even wrapped our minds around. And I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more, because again, that term, the word cryptocurrency is almost like a misnomer, because currency, you're kind of referring to something that has monetary value. And while Bitcoin was created for that very purpose, and I guess you could say Litecoin also was forked off of Bitcoin in 2011 for that purpose, the vast majority of quote cryptocurrencies have no interest in being currencies. Maybe they're currencies for their own platform, but I don't like tokens. I'm not sure if that would be the same kind of thing, though. For the most part, I consider them tech stocks. A guy in my sector calls the whole thing crypto assets. So yes, when people ask me what the other ones, I said, yeah, they are, to me, a new age version of tech stocks. Ethereum would be the perfect example. There's unlimited supply. It has created some kind of a technology platform that may or may not become something big, both for itself and for other current cryptocurrencies. And by the way, Bitcoin is going to, now that I segue, it's going to be able to do exactly what Ethereum does. So don't think that Ethereum. In fact, there's several other cryptos that can do what Ethereum can do, but they just don't have the network effect right now. So, it'll take some boost to get them into that level of popularity relative to Ethereum. Or if Ethereum blows itself up because it's very centralized and it does have technology issues. So to me, these are all a big group of speculative tech stocks, completely unregulated, which makes them even more speculative. But I do think that some of them are going to be doing spectacularly well. I think some are going to do well simply because, like in the .com, it's a rising boat. If there really are trillions coming into the sector, it's not all going to go to Bitcoin. It's going to go to the sector. And so people diversify, and there are going to be better stories than others. There are going to actually be some stories that may actually be able to stand alone as opposed to being destroyed or subsumed by the bigger players. I mean, like, for instance, smart contracts. It's very conceivable that as Bitcoin develops itself, it does all these things that Ethereum does, and Ethereum just kind of fades away. But maybe Ethereum can discern itself over time and become even bigger. It's just, we don't know. But the fact is, I don't think they're all scams. I think there's plenty of scams out there. I mean, the majority are just capitalizing on the growth of the sector for free money, and nothing more obvious than these hard forks, because some of them are just blatant free money grabs, as opposed to they actually have something to give. But absolutely, there's going to be some huge winners, maybe even some bigger winners than Bitcoin in percentage terms. We just don't know. For now, I'm, as you say, I'm a sound money guy. I got into the sector completely due to Bitcoin, in my view, at first being equal to gold. Now I actually think it's the superior asset. But other people are in for many other reasons. So you're going to see some dramatic changes in the tech landscape that are going to be focused on the crypto sector.
Well, Andy, I think that was an incredible conversation and a lot of meat for everyone who tuned in today. I appreciate you coming on Crush the Street. If people want to learn more about what you're doing and just get this information on a regular basis, I mean, I can tell everyone that I'm signed up at your site, and it's amazing work, and you put your heart and soul into it, so it's worth every penny. So, I mean, if you just kind of close out on where you're at right now, where you're spending your time and energy.
Right. Again, I left Miles Franklin 2 months ago. Or 3 months ago, but I started 2 months ago, cryptogoldcentral.com. It is my pride and joy. It's the first time I've worked for myself, and I am, as you said, working so hard. In just 2 months, I think I have like 550 posts, and these are not just like lines, these are like articles, and I'm tweeting like crazy. So look, come to cryptogoldcentral.com. I have a free 7-day trial subscription. You'll see, like, for instance, this Bcash, all the stuff that's been going on this weekend. I've written like 4 full-length articles and 10 or 12 other ones, really getting into detail about what's going on. And I think you will be really, really educated about cryptocurrency, which you need to be by following this website, which, if you pay for it, just costs $225 a year. I also offer crypto consultations or precious metal consultations. People want to know, how do I buy or sell or trade it? And that's what I'm here for. So you can go to the site, or you can email me at ahoffman@cryptogoldcentral.com.
All right. All right, Andy. Thank you so much for coming on Crush. It's always a pleasure. You have a great day.
You too. Thanks, Ken.